Hi everyone and welcome along to Sonic Academy with me, Chris. Today we're joined by one of South Africa's greatest trance exports. He has just released an album on Armada, and to add to the chaos, he's just become a dad. Please welcome Nate from Protoculture. Hi Nate, how are you?
Hey man, thanks for having me. All good?
I'm all good, Let's get it out of the way. How was the summer for you? It's been a bit of a hectic time with a new album on Armada and also becoming a dad.
Yeah, it's been crazy, but business as usual as well. Like a lot of touring. The studio's taken a bit of a backseat at the moment because obviously I've become a dad, and so I spend a lot of time with the kid when I'm home. But yeah, I'm in the studio now again, working on some new stuff. So yeah, getting back into things again.
And did you take any sort of break over the summer, or was it business as usual and just trying to work
Um,
the family life and the hectic schedule? Because you had an album out, back in
yeah,
April
yeah.
or so?
I mean, I took a month off after the birth of our daughter. I mean, I actually I flew back from Miami on a Sunday, and by Monday afternoon we had a kid. So,
And how did you
um,
cope with, like, when I was having kids and DJing, I just had to book 4 weeks off around what we thought was the due date. What happens if you got stuck in Miami or...
yeah. I mean, we'd planned ahead. We knew that she was coming on the Monday, so it was cutting it fine. It would have been a disaster if I hadn't made it, but
Yeah.
we did, so it was okay. Yeah, and then I took a month off, and then I had to start touring the album because the album release was a month after she was born. So we did the album tour, which is yeah, it was good. I mean, like I try and come home in between the gigs as much as possible to spend time with the family. So we manage.
You live in Cape Town, is that correct? Are you native of Cape Town, or whereabouts in South
Yeah.
Africa are you from? You are. How did you get started in the scene? I think you started around 2000. Is that correct?
Yeah, I started off doing psytrance mostly. I was actually when I studied audio engineering, and one of my buddies from audio engineering was actually the brother of Regan Taken, who owns Nano Records.
Right.
It's a big psytrance label from Cape Town. So I was actually producing breakbeats at the time, like new school breaks. I was big into sort of Crystal Method and all that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, so I met Gareth there. We sort of got into the whole psytrance thing, and then yeah, for the last 8 years I've been doing that. So and then I don't know, just kind of I got really bored of the full on stuff. As I'm getting older, like I've had to slow things down slightly, um, and also I'm loving the freedom of the sort of more commercial trance scene at the moment, just because I can do what I want. Like if you're working in an underground scene, they're quite they're not really open to experimenting with like vocals or something that may be a little bit more sort of mainstream or sort of pop style stuff. So that's why I kind of got out of that, just to have freedom to do what I want musically. So
Let's have a chat about the state of the trance scene. Where do you see it at the moment? Where is it, in a good state, bad state, or how do you see trance at the moment?
um I don't know, the term trance as a genre has become so I mean, it's not really applicable anymore. If you look at every other genre, it's all mashed together nowadays. I mean,
Hmm.
I can't tell the difference between tech house and techno and deep house and even some of the EDM stuff now and trance. It's all kind of the same thing. It's like it's quite weird for dance music in general at the moment. But I mean, the trance scene, I suppose, I'm seeing a lot of like the 138 stuff coming back. To be honest, it's not really my cup of tea. That never really been into that kind of sound.
Hmm.
Um,
So you don't like the more sort of banging end of the trance, the sort of Sean Tyassi, Greg Downey type stuff.
yeah, it's not that I don't like it. It's just not my preference.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's fantastic that there is that music. It's just stuff that I don't really play. I think it's really I don't like the production. I don't like those big sort of kick drums that hit you in the chest.
Yeah.
Like I come from psytrance where the sort of production's quite thin. The kick drums are always kind of like more low frequency kicks,
Hmm.
and there's a lot more space in the tracks. I find those 138 trances always a little bit too, you know, too big and
cluttered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm looking for. But yeah, and then there's the whole Trance 2.0 thing, which is really teetering on, EDM stuff. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like, a lot of people complaining that it's either gone too commercial or it's this and that. I try not to take notice of where the genre is going and just write music that I actually feel like writing.
Well, I mean, that's really refreshing here, because I'm like you. The whole 1.3 thing, it doesn't sit easy with me. I love Trance 2.0, and I think some of the young guys, the production values are incredible, the sounds are incredible, the layering and stuff, but I get really uncomfortable when if you're 1.3 DJ, you cannot play Trance 2.0 at the start of the night. I mean, do you play a broad spectrum of stuff, or I always love the freedom of DJing when you could start off with a 128 track and build it up to 137.
Well, I think that's something that Max as well. We've been doing quite a few back-to-back sets, and I think it's something that both of us are quite proud of, in the sense that we sort of pride ourselves in doing sets that are, all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
We've both been pushing open to close sets in the States now, doing sort of 6-hour DJ sets. And it's a great opportunity to start. Max is playing loads of techno at the moment. I like playing a lot of progressive stuff. I like playing house in the beginning of the sets as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, perfect example, we played the last set at Tomorrowland this year. We started after Sean Tyas.
Mm-hmm.
I think he finished his set at about 1:40. Mm-hmm. And we started at about 1:40, and we finished with Guy J's Dizzy Moments at 1:24. And this is in an hour-long set. So.
And is that just DJing? Your set is slowing it down and you're finding moments within the set to bring it.
We were playing the last set of the party, so we felt it pertinent to actually bring it down. It was a beautiful track to finish the set. I think that's important. When you're DJing, is that you don't just pick stuff because it's 1:40 or because it's banging. Mm-hmm. That Guy J track at the end of the set for me was, and I think for a lot of people in the dance floor, was the biggest track of the set. But yet it's at 124 BPM, tech house or progressive house track. So as a DJ, I think that's important to actually, pay attention to what music actually does to the dance floor, rather than just, pick a genre that's banging or BPM that's high or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
It's a bit sad to see these sort of young EDM headliners just come out and they do 1 hour of banging sort of the Beatport top 10, and there's no sentiment behind the set, there's no journey behind the set, there's no feeling behind the set. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think production values have come a long way, and there's some amazing producers out there, but I think the art of DJing is completely lost at the moment.
Yeah,
there are no real DJs at the moment. There's very few of them. I find the guys that are doing proper DJ sets are the guys in the techno scene, but then again, for me personally, I find those techno sets incredibly boring. Mm-hmm. I love the production values in those sets, but I just find the lack of melody for me doesn't fly. But there's not a lot of people that know how to DJ anymore, And Max is great like that. He's a DJ's DJ. He spends a lot of time just listening to music and building these sets that are stories, mm-hmm. not just a collection of the biggest hits, And yeah,
I think Max comes from an era where Robbie was primarily our DJ sort of driver, and they came from it where you told a story, you took the listener on a journey. It was about building sets, and we always tried to do that within, even if we had an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes, we still had to try and have some sort of start, middle, and end to the whole thing.
Oh yeah, you got to have structure.
Talking of DJ, do you DJ CDJs with pen drives? Are you on tractor controllers? What's your DJ setup?
I actually when I was doing the Psytrance stuff, it was all live shows, So I used to use Ableton quite a lot for that, but ever since I got into the whole trance thing, I kind of ditched the whole live thing just because it's incredibly boring. Mm-hmm. Playing your own stuff over and over again at every festival. And yeah,
I'm just going to say hello to Giuseppe Ottavani there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if that's what you do, that's cool. But for me, it was I just wasn't having fun doing it, you know. So I got into the whole CDJ thing actually when I did ASOT 500 a couple of years back in Johannesburg, just simply because they told us that you couldn't have a laptop on stage,
Right.
you know. And I didn't feel like burning CDs, so I got into the whole pen drive thing, which is great. I mean, a record box for me is amazing. I do use the laptop on stage if I'm doing a longer show. You know, if I'm doing 3-4 hour sets, 6 hour sets, especially. I just plug a LAN cable straight into record box and load the tracks from there. Just simply because it's easier to search for stuff.
Yeah.
You know, after 5 hours, you don't want to be looking through a little menu on a CDJ. It's just much easier to just type it in and load it up. You know, so,
well, yeah. Let's move on to studio. You're in your studio in South Africa. Take us back to how did you get started in the business? How was it, you know, a young kid in a it's not isolated country. There was definitely plenty of DJs coming through and stuff, and there was a scene. So, but how did you reach out to the European scene, the Asia scene, back in those early days?
It was weird. Everything happened overnight for me. I mean, I started producing stuff when I was still a kid. I think I got my first sound card and sort of MIDI device and stuff when I was 11 or 12 years old. So I had a MIDI sequencer called Voyetra Pro, which came on a floppy disk. It's like a DOS-based, DOS 5.1 based MIDI sequencer. And then I had Fast Tracker, which I used to use as well.
Okay.
And then onto Cakewalk, the very first version of Cakewalk. Actually, it was for Windows 3.1. I was using that. And then eventually Logic, and then Logic went to Mac, so I changed to Cubase, and now I'm on a Mac, but I'm still using Cubase. But anyways, yeah, I mean, that's the software side of things. But yeah, like actually breaking into the scene, like I said, I met Regan from Nano, and you know, I sent him some stuff, and he managed to get me a release. At the time, there was precious little artists in South Africa releasing stuff internationally, and I had a release on a Swedish label called Spiral Tracks, which is pretty big in the psytrance scene. And I think it was about 3-4 months after I released that track, I got a call to come and play at Glastonbury in the UK on the Glade stage.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, I mean that was a pretty good first gig, you know.
Yeah.
200,000 strong festival, you know, and so I went and did that, and then another month after that I had a month long in Tokyo, and ever since then I've been traveling. So yeah, it was just a whirlwind, you know. I didn't really promote myself or anything. It was just kind of bam.
So, but you knew I mean, obviously from an early age, at age 12, you were getting into these cakewalks and early DOS systems. So you knew that. You mean you were pretty focused in this is what you wanted to do.
Yeah, like I kind of thought about it as a hobby until I left school, and you know, I always figured I'd go into architecture or art or something like that. And my entire family is full of artists, but yeah. And then I'd been fiddling around with music since I was 12, and I left school and I just thought, you know, what the hell, this is what I love doing, and I went and studied audio engineering, which is great. I mean, audio engineering is great, but there's you know, you're not going to really do much with. I found you don't really do much with audio engineering itself, but through that, I actually met, you know, a lot of guys at the college that were also studying there, and then kind of got sucked into it. And then after that first release and the first gigs came through, I was like, stuff it, I'm going to do this. You know, I can make some money out of this. We'll stick with that.
Let's go through your studio setup. You did have a studio in Cape Town, but you've since moved at home and you work from home. What sort of setup have you got? Is it purely software based? Do you have any hardware in the studio?
I'm pretty much software based now. You know, I did a lot of studio cleaning a while back through pretty much everything. I mean, I could just rattle off some of the kit that I used to have, because I'm from the old school. Like, I used to have gear back in the day. I mean, I actually used to record everything onto a Roland VS880 hard disk recorder, because I didn't have a PC that could handle audio recording.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I had a Yamaha OTR, you know, which was useless, so we chucked that out. A rack of synths. There was an old Juno 106 in here, Waldorf XDK. I had a rack of old Valley People compressors and gates sitting down here as well. That's all gone. The Virus is gone. I sold the Virus a while back, and I'm really pissed off that I did because I missed that thing like crazy.
I was going to say that there's probably a collective gasp going, you got rid of a Virus, but why did you get rid of it?
You know, at the time, because it was a TI, the TI Snow, and when I bought it, their software was so shit. It really was awful. Like nothing would sync properly. The MIDI notes were going out of time all the time. When you're bouncing audio, you actually used to have to go and actually cut the notes out because everything was like completely randomly out of time. It was completely useless when it first came out, and it took them about a year or two to fix it. You know, so I just I got rid of it. I got sick of it.
And so,
but I might buy one of those again soon.
What software do you use? It's Cubase? Do you have a bunch of plugins? Do you have a very select few plugins? And do you use Waves or do you use UAD?
No, I've got a pretty small palette of plugins at the moment. Like, I used to fiddle around with more stuff, but I don't know. Like as far as instruments are concerned, like it's pretty much all about Massive for me. Massive is really my go-to synth. It's the simplest thing to program for me. I mean, there's other synths that sound a little bit more analog or whatever, but I just love Massive for the ease of use. So I think that's pretty much my go-to. I've got Synth. I'm kind of fed up of waiting for 64-bit version for a Mac, so I haven't really been using it much at the moment.
Do you think that they're missing a huge trick there? Because I've moved to Logic 10 and I can't be bothered with any bridges, and I've just sacked off Silence. So you obviously have as well. Do you find that's a common thread with other producers?
I don't know. I think a lot of guys still rely pretty heavily on it, but I kind of been using it for so long now that everything kind of sounds the same to me that comes out of it all the time. I keep seeing like new preset banks that everybody's advertising, new preset banks and stuff, and it's like, haven't we heard all this stuff before? It's all the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't use it as much as what I used to. Like I still love a lot of the other native instrument stuff. I really like Razor, actually, the one that comes with Reactor 5. Razor's pretty good. It's just a very different sound as well. I think the Lush I really like as well, but it's such a pain to use on my current PC. Just like the CPU usage just goes through the roof every time I load up one of those. Monarch as well. Like if I'm looking for something really, really analog, I use Monarch quite a bit as well.
And what would you use Monarch for? Is it for obviously bass lines and stuff? Is that?
Yeah, if just specifically for stuff. If I'm looking for that kind of really dusty old, analog kind of sound. I thought it was quite amazing that they got such an incredible analog feel off a synth, which is essentially programmed in Reactor. I've never heard Reactor sound that real before. Which is pretty good.
And I've seen an interview where you talk about you layer and layer and layer, and is it always, do you layer the same synth, like massive on top of massive, or would you maybe throw in a Razor on top of a massive, or how do you go about layering? It's the one question we always get asked is, how do you get those layers and how do you get them to gel and sit?
Yeah, I mean, what synth I use for layers is largely irrelevant to me. It's more about the sound. So there's two ways that I approach layering. Like one is I don't really know what I'm doing and I just scroll through shit until something works.
Perfect.
There's nothing scientific about that at all.
I think that's the big secret, that everybody does that. We just sort of randomly go, oh, that sounds good, and that's people think that we're with some sort of scientific boffins and we know exactly how to layer.
Well, I mean, then there's merit to that. I mean, a lot of my best tracks have been complete accidents. So it is worth sometimes just not thinking about what you're doing and just trying stuff. The other way that I layer stuff is I'll actually approach it, and look at the character of the sound. Like, we'll have like a sort of ravey kind of detuned saw lead kind of sound, but often those, because it's detuned, you don't get the attack that you'd really want from stuff. So I'll often use like maybe take a saw lead and put an envelope to change the pitch at the beginning of those, so you get that kind of click from the pitch bend.
Yeah, yeah.
And then maybe another one that's a little bit more stereo.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll kind of take the sound as a whole and go, what do I need to make this the perfect sound?
Mm-hmm.
So then if it needs more attack, I'll program a sound that has more attack, but not necessarily the stereo image that you want. So then you'll do another one that's for the stereo image, and then kind of stick all those together into a group, and then sidechain, compress, whatever, mix it as the whole from there afterwards.
Let's talk about your bottom end. It's not a typical trance bottom end, if that makes sense, and I genuinely think that comes from your psych trance days. What do you use a lot of ARP bases, and do you layer those up? And what's your, is it massive, your go-to sort of ARP bass? You've got a real weighty bottom end going on.
Yeah, that's well, I mean, a lot of the psytrance stuff, all the bass lines that we used to do was always pretty much just a saw wave, and it's quite mid-range. We chop a lot of the bottom off, because when you're working at 140 with 16th notes, stuff tends to blur when you get down at the bottom there. Mm-hmm. So I think I still work quite similar. Like I'm not big on sort of using bass pads or subs or whatever. I do quite a lot of these 16th note things where it's essentially just saws. I think the one that I used on the remix that I did for you guys, it's a patch that I did for Solar Stone remix, and it's in Silent. It's basically one of the, you got the A and B sections. Yep. So for oscillators, I think the A section was pretty much the mono sub section, which I think it's a saw one octave down, another saw on 0, and then there is a detuned saw on the B section, right? And there's actually a noise generator on there as well. Sort of white noise that's just in the attack.
Yeah.
It's funny, like the white noise, like quite often if you use it in that way, if you use it subtly, it never sounds like noise. It actually just kind of adds to the whole stereo feel of it. It kind of just is more airy and a little bit more, like, especially when you're using it with something that's detuned, it kind of just makes everything crisp and nice and bright. So yeah, I mean, that's it. As far as like processing goes, it's just probably just a compressor on there, and I do use a bit of sidechain on that, but it's fairly simple. Like I'll usually have a lower running bass, which is a little bit more subby than the other stuff, and then kind of a mid-range one that I layer on top of that. Mm-hmm. Often I'll have the one that's underneath running the 16th note, just constant 16th notes the whole time. The one on top will have a little bit more of a pattern to it, a little bit more of a groove.
And you always use a 16th note bass line? Is it a common thread throughout your productions, that sort of RB?
Not always, but I do love them. I've got a thing for that kind of. I think it's like something that I've kind of made my own over the years.
It's your sound, isn't it?
Yeah, especially in the trance scene. I mean, there's not a lot. The psytrance scene, everybody does that, but there's not that many guys that do it, in the sort of mainstream trance scene. Like, I'm a big fan of Oyan's stuff as well. Like, you can hear a lot of influence from his kind of thing, and he kind of does the same thing. It's really kind of driving 16th note bass lines in a lot of his stuff.
Cool. Let's go back to the awesome remix you did for us, and I've probably thanked you 100 times for it, because I think genuinely it's the best remix we've ever had done. The one thing, as soon as I heard it, that really struck me was the riff, the main riff. What synths did you use there? Because it was glorious. If you haven't heard the remixes, you can go and have a listen to it on Beatport, or I'm sure YouTube has it up. The Agnelli Nelson New Light Protoculture remix. The main riff, we had a very staccato-y type sort of noise going on, and when it came back from you, it was this gloriously airy, beautiful synth. What was the makeup of that?
Actually, I'm not.
You can't remember?
I'm just looking for the project files quickly, because I actually can't remember at all.
That's fine.
I think I actually just worked on top of the layers that you sent me, like, because I had audio files from you guys, and I think I actually just layered more stuff on top of those. It's most likely massive.
Right.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it's probably just a bunch of like sort of plucked sounds from Massive that we
Yeah,
put
no,
on top of it.
it just became this more. I mean, the riff changed for me. It just became really uplifting, and it took on a totally different vibe from what we sent you, and that's what I love. That's what I always expected from a remix, was this reinterpretation, and we never really got it. It was always sort of crowbarred, but you completely reinterpreted the song and actually
Uh,
made the
I
original
think,
sound like pish.
yeah, I think the main difference was that the original parts of them, the melody that you guys did was quite it was quite sort of dry and a bit more grinding,
Yeah.
which in the context of your track worked really well. But you know, like I think I had quite a bit of reverb and delay to it as well, so just like quite over the top,
Mm.
and then sidechain everything. I mean, just bear with me. I can actually tell you exactly what it is. Oh well, it's still loading. So, anyways,
No problem. Tell me this. What sort of plugins do you use? Do you have again, we'll go back to, do you use Waves? Do you use UAD? Or do you have, I mean, I had a computer hard drive failure a couple of months ago, and it was a total clear out of all my plugins, because I used to have this massive folder, and now I've got 4 or 5 that I know that I always use. Do you have this big folder, or what's?
no, I mean, you know, a while back as well, because it was quite liberating getting rid of all the hardware when I did that initially, and then I kind of figured, you know, why stop there? I'll do the same thing with the software, and you know, I wanted to kind of focus myself on stuff which, because I was finding like I had all these plugins that made amazing sounds, but if you actually told me, you know, I need like a detuned saw pad from this one, I'd be like, well, I actually have no idea how the synth works. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
have it installed, but I haven't used it. So I just kind of figured like I'd rather focus on stuff which works for me, and I'd rather, you know, learn the ins and outs of that like completely. So as a result, like I went through the synths, like Omnisphere I use quite a bit, Massive, Silent I've got, most of them at Native Instrument stuff. I've got Complete 9, so I've got all the Native Instruments plugins as well. So you know, from a mixing perspective, I've got the Native Instruments stuff, which a lot of them were designed by Softube,
Mm-hmm.
which are
Yeah.
great. Like
Yeah.
the Teletronics, the LA2A clone that they've done, and what's the other ones? There was a couple of, they did some Lexicon reverbs, which I don't use all that much, but yeah, I found the EQs and stuff. I think one of them's like a massive passive ripoff as well,
Mm-hmm.
a Manny ripoff, which is really nice. I keep those around just for like sort of character plugins. My go-to plugin set for mixdowns is FabFilter stuff. So, I mean, and this was a classic example. Like I'd had some of the FabFilter stuff for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kind of like, it's just another compressor, or it's just another the EQ. And then, you know, I actually took the time to watch some of their tutorials, and their plugins are mind blowing once you actually take the time to figure it out. I mean, I've done like drum loops just with using Timeless, where it sounds like, you know, like a sampled drum machine kind of thing going on
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
just Timeless modulation, which is amazing. Um, you know, Pro Q as well. Like I'd never figured out any of the stereo EQing as well. So a lot of stuff I do now is, you know, we actually switch it over to
Mid-side.
Trance mode, yeah,
Right.
and do a lot of, especially with the bass lines. You know, I cut a lot of the stuff off underneath 100.
Mm-hmm.
It's all mono, you know, and you can actually boost stuff higher in stereo afterwards on the other side. Um, yeah.
We were listening to your mix downs in the studio. They're very clean. I mean, how do you approach the mixing? What are the key sort of aspects of your mixing? What can you tell, you know, those up and coming producers about space and depth in your mixes?
Okay, the first bit of advice is, I think, try not to think about it too much. That's the most important thing for me. Like I always tell people, like if you wanna learn to mix properly, do it. Try and mix a whole track without doing anything to it. Just use levels and low cuts. If you can mix a track like that with levels, low cuts, and nothing else, that's a really good starting point to kind of get your head in the right place. Yeah, I think try and do the simplest thing first, and then after that, I'm always thinking about stereo image. That's really important for me, because that's even before you start EQing things, if you can fit stuff in the right place in stereo image, that's half your work done. A lot of the time you don't even need to load those EQ plugins to start boosting frequencies and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, 90% of the time you can get the majority of your track done just like that.
And so are you kind of a light plugin user in terms of that you try and not totally over compress and over EQ every channel and everything, if you try and balance first?
Yeah, no, the compression as well. I do a lot of compression, but I think that's always the third thing you got to. You always look at your levels and positioning first, and then look at your EQs, and then compression. And there are certain sounds, like when you're working with drums, for example. Obviously, the compression is important because you're working with lots of transients, and stuff does slip through the net. So you do want to compress, but I try to stay away from compressors as like a thing that you just stick on every single channel. I think it's pretty silly to do that.
Yeah, I think isn't there a popular misconception that you throw a compressor on it and it suddenly makes the sound amazing, and actual fact, it's the sound design that's wrong in the first place, and then the balance is the secondary thing,
Yeah. Look, also, what a lot of people don't realize is, I mean, a compressor is really, it's controlling your dynamics, obviously. So the stuff that's really got dynamics is like a human voice, for example, or if you're recording guitar or whatever, that's where it really comes in handy. But if you think about what you're getting out of electronic music when you're using a synthesizer, which is purely based in software, the output of that stuff, it's not very dynamic.
No.
So the whole reasoning behind putting a dynamics controller on something which has no dynamics in the first place doesn't make a lot of sense. So you're just degrading your audio at the end of the day. So I try to stay away from stuff like that as much as possible.
Totally agree. The other area that it sort of becomes very apparent when you're listening to the album, music is more than mathematics. Groove, what do you use for groove? You have a really lovely, I love that shuffle that you have going on. What do you use for that?
All the percussion that I do is pretty much just audio channels in Cubase. Cubase's audio editing is really cool. It's a bit like Pro Tools. I mean, I used to use Logic as well, but I'm kind of lost in Logic. I just don't find the audio editing easy enough for me. But in Cubase, it's just, it's there. It's got these little folded tracks and stuff that you can put stuff inside little compartments and things, and it's really easy to work with. So like I just I layer a lot of percussion as well.
So are these single hits or these loops? Then if there are loops, are you chopping bits out of the loops, or what?
Pretty much single hits, but I mean, I do use loops, but I chop them. I'll often just take little bits out of the loops, but a lot of the stuff I pretty much make my own loops. I'll use loops as kind of like a tool for just beefing up, if you want to make something sound a little bit more live, like I'll often use like one of these like house loops with like bongos or whatever, and it maybe distorted, and it always just kind of sits underneath. But yeah, I mean, the percussion for me, layering the percussion is as important as layering the melodies. Like, and I find a lot of guys these days, myself included, sometimes I kind of go a little bit more simple with the percussion, but I think our music is more than mathematics. A lot of the tracks on there, the percussion is probably 20 channels of audio.
Right. Okay.
Various little hits and
is it 20 channels of just adding, complexity, or is it sort of 5 channels of an off hat and a shaker and a closed hat all doing the same thing? Or
yeah, it's both. I mean, like the hi-hats are often like, for example, what I'll do with the hi-hats on a lot of tracks from the album as well is I'll have a hi-hat, but I'm not always crazy about the thinness of a hi-hat, so I'll often put a shaker with it as well, but a shaker doesn't have that same attack that the hat has. So I'll layer the shaker and the hat together, playing the same pattern, and then I'll probably layer another shaker underneath that. auto pan on it, so you've got like
Width.
notes on either side.
And what do you do then for groove? Are you shifting things around on the arrange screen, or are you applying a groove template?
No, it's all just done on the arrange screen. I mean, you can quantize the audio just like you would with MIDI notes in Cubase. And music's more than mathematics. Was just, I think it was like a 35% shuffle on it, but there's no templates involved. Like I do sometimes like actually just turn the quantize or the snap off completely. It can make a difference if you just turn the snap off and move things around slightly offbeat.
Yeah.
It'll just change like either push or pull slightly with the groove. But that's, I'll do that with a few sounds, like more often with a clap or a snare or something like that. Not too much with the other stuff.
What's the favorite part of producing? Is it starting with the drums and getting the groove together? Is it chords? Is it sound design? Is it mix down? What's the favorite bit?
Like I'll sometimes start with a kick and a bass. I think a bass line I often start with. Now that I think about it, bass line, or I'll start in the break and actually start with a build up, and start with a melody. And I find that I have a better success rate of actually finishing a track if I start with a melody first. Like I don't finish a lot of stuff. I'll often have like an amazing bass line and then just get bored of it and finish the track. So I think it's the melodies. If I was advising somebody to start somewhere, I'd say start with a melody first, just because it's the center of the track.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. The other strong area that definitely comes through is your chordal sequences within the album. Do you program? Do you play? Do you have a keyboard that you play, or do you program with the voice? And do you have a rudimentary understanding of theory, or is it just messing about, going, "Oh, that sounds lovely"?
I do have an understanding of theory, but I refuse to read music. I hate it. I'm lucky enough to be able to play pretty much by ear. If you play me something, I can play it back to you.
Okay.
Pretty much straight away. But 90% of the stuff I play live, and then I'll edit it from there. So I'll often just lay down a kick and just jam for 20 minutes.
With a piano, or how do you jam?
Yeah, piano, or just just pick a preset and see what floats my boat for that particular time. Like I'll often just load up. I'll load up a synth that I like. Like Silent was always good for that, just because there's so many usable presets in there, and just kind of flick through presets whilst playing. One hand on the mouse, one hand on the keyboard, and just play shit. For half an hour or so, and if I come across something I like, then I'll flesh out that idea and see how it goes from there.
And do you start with a melody line, or do you start with a chordal pattern, or what's the sort of, is it a mixture of both?
Yeah. I don't really have rules for that kind of thing. I think when it comes to the musical side of a track, I think it's important not to impose too many boundaries on yourself. Like, don't go, I gotta start with the melody, and keep banging your head against a brick wall until you get a melody. It's whatever flies. Like if you, and that's something that comes across as well when you're playing the stuff in live. I think it's always good to do that, because you don't think about what you should be doing. You just think about what what's coming out of your head. And so especially with the music side of things, there's no guidelines or rules for me. I just do whatever I feel like. And other days I don't feel like I'm in a musical mood, and then I'll come in and work on sound design and stuff, and maybe something there inspires me. But it's whenever I feel like it's working, that's what I'll continue with. So
you've been pretty prolific. You've done 4 albums in 13 years. Do you get sort of ideas? Do you become exhausted after an album that you need to take a break, or are you very strict in how you get into the studio, and you treat it like a 9 to 5 almost, or is it much more laid back than that?
It's a bit of a 9 to 5 for me at the moment, simply because when you got a kid as well,
Yeah.
like the 4 a.m. studio sessions don't really work so well. But no, it's not really a job for me. I mean, being in the studio it's a hobby. So if I wasn't doing this for a living, I'd still be sitting in the studio all day long making music. So yeah, it's not a chore for me at all. I mean, I love being here. So as much time as I can spend in the studio, I do. So.
Before we started recording, there you were chatting about your hopefully moving by the end of the year. You're going to Amsterdam. Why the relocation?
Oh, I live pretty much on the opposite side of the world from everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, South Africa's a nightmare to travel from. I mean, to the US. I've had quite a few tours in the US in the last few years. It takes me around 35 hours to get there.
Wow.
So it's purely just for my own sanity. And on top of that, there's a lot going on in Amsterdam as well. It'll be good to sort of be able to collaborate more with other artists and stuff. So we decided we'll take the plunge and move over there for a few years.
And I've noticed on your Facebook, you do a lot of climbing up mountains and taking GoPro shots. Is that something you do realize that Amsterdam's completely flat? Don't you?
Yeah. I picked the one country in the world that doesn't even have a freaking hill in it anyway. No, actually, funny thing is, they've actually got some of the best climbing gyms in the world, indoor climbing gyms.
Okay.
The highest one in the world as well. It's is in Amsterdam. Yeah, I mean that's been really good for me actually. I recently got into it because we've got a massive mountain in our back garden, and it's a pretty good source of inspiration. I spend a lot of time just by myself up in the mountain, and it's a good way to clear your head out before you get back into the studio again.
Yeah, no, definitely. When you see those shots and you've just got this beautiful vista, it's like, yeah, that would inspire you to go into the studio and go, yeah, this is
Yeah. Yeah, especially with GoPros as well. I mean, the GoPro South Africa is pretty good. They sponsored me with 2 of them, so it's it's fun taking them out and getting some good shots of those.
And you take them on tour and take some shots and send them back.
Oh
to the poster? Yeah. Very cool.
I do like tour diaries with them as well, which is pretty cool.
And just one last thing I want to talk on. How do you find the whole social media thing and keeping on top of it? Do you find that laborious or something you enjoy engaging with?
It's pretty much an essential these days. I mean, there's no getting away from it. Like you've got to do it. Yeah, there's times that I really enjoy it. I like connecting with fans, and that's cool. It's something you couldn't do a couple of years ago. Like you didn't have that connection with people aside from the dance floor. And I think it's good for your DJ sets and stuff as well. What people, especially if you're doing a radio show. That's amazing because you get a lot of feedback and a lot of insight to what people actually want to listen to. Then there's other days where I just can't be asked. Where
yeah, you have nothing to say.
The last thing I want to do is get on Twitter and talk to other people. So yeah, but I think for the most part it's a good thing. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nate, I want to thank you so much for a really interesting insight into your workings in your studio and your DJing. It has been a real pleasure chatting to you and getting to know you a bit better. We've our paths have crossed over the last while. I was actually a huge fan. We played out your tracks prior, and when John O'Callaghan said you were doing the remix, I was absolutely thrilled. I want to thank you for joining us today. Is there anything else you want to chat to us about, or anything you want to say? Have you any upcoming singles on Armada?
Yeah, I've got some new stuff that I'm working on now, and then hopefully a remix album at the end of the year. I haven't got any release info on the new stuff yet, but I'm currently banging away. I've got like 2 or 3 on the go. So hopefully there'll be a bunch of new stuff coming out soon.
Cool. Well, listen, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and for chatting to us and revealing some of the studio secrets. It's been a great pleasure, and we'll see you all very, very soon.
Nice.
Goodbye, Nate. Bye.
Thanks so much for having me. Cheers.
No problem.
Bye.
See you. Bye.